Summon the Gods by Melinda Kucsera, Book 2 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy. Part 1, Chapter 1, Demons and Arrows. Rosalie lifted the spear and braced herself as the demon covered head to toe in hardened blood charged toward her from the other end of the hallway. "You've got this. Mom taught you how to fight with a stick." Since an enchanted forest that hated edged metal covered Shiari, sticks were the preferred weapon to carry, and they doubled as walking sticks on long hikes. Spears weren't as common because of the forest's hatred of metal weapons, but many villages lay in valleys where the forest didn't grow, and spears were really handy when you needed to shove the bandits back into the forest for the trees to deal with. Why am I thinking about that now? Maybe it was homesickness. The village of Larkspur nestled in a pretty valley with cold, clear streams and bramble patches full of berries. She could picture the tidy stone homes standing proudly along the winding trails through the valley. The wind liked to whip through the valley in the winter, freezing her legs. Maybe that's why her thoughts turned toward home. Cold crept up her legs, and her breath misted in the air in front of her. Why am I so cold? If the blood demon felt it, she gave no sign. She just kept running toward Rosalie with her bloody claws extended like 10 skinny, sharp daggers all pointed at her prey. Blood dripped from the demon's lengthening fangs onto the hardened blood, armoring the creature, and it added a row of spikes along her chest. Blood dripped from the demon's lengthening fangs onto the hardened blood, armoring the creature, and it added a row of spikes along her chest. Rosalie cursed inside her head since her lips were numb, and no sound emerged when she tried to curse aloud. The ice crept higher as the demon neared. Rosalie swung the spear like a staff to fend the creature off since her feet stuck to the floor. Hopefully they weren't frozen to it, because that could make things like escape rather awkward. How can I fight when I can't move my feet? Fighting required some footwork, but Rosalie couldn't lift either foot, no matter how hard she tried. Thank God this spear gives me reach. Or it did until it cracked into 2 pieces when it struck the demoness's blood armor, leaving Rosalie holding the short end of the stick, of course. Just once I'd like to end up on the winning side. Since she was stuck on the defensive, she swung the shortened haft like a club. But the cold raced up her body, immobilizing her arms. God damn it. Why am I so cold? Was this Rand's doing? He could wish for anything, but why would he wish for her to freeze in place? That didn't make sense, as the ground dropped out from under her feet, and she fell into a chasm of white light. Rosalie tumbled head over heels through the snow, swirling around her. But that was the worst way to fall. She didn't need her mom's voice yelling in her ear to always protect her head.
You can get a peg leg if you lose a foot, and a hook if you lose a hand, but you're dead if you lose your head.
Mom liked to say, but it was sound advice right now. Rosalie dropped what remained of the spear and threw her arms over her head. I hope I don't land on my head. How did I even fall? There was a solid stone floor under me, but Rand could wish it away if he wanted. Did he do that? Why would he do that? If he did it, then wouldn't I have hit the floor on the level below the one I was standing on? The ceilings are high, but they can't be more than 30 or 40 feet above my head on every floor. So why was she still falling? The only reason that came to mind made her smile. Perhaps I'm not under Mount Arendran anymore. Well, she thought he wrapped an arm around her ankles at one point, but maybe she imagined that since she was staring down the blood demon charging toward her. Maybe he used his magic to take us back in time. She tried to remember both times he used his power to do that before. Was there a white light then? Or did he just disappear? Rosalie struck something hard. Well, her arms did, since she wrapped them protectively over her head. Then her shoulders struck a hard, cold mass, followed by her back, butt, and legs, laying her out on the ground. For a moment she lay there and gathered her wits as she blinked the white light away so she could see where she was. When her vision cleared, Rosalie stared up at a stormy sky, and a snowflake landed in her eye. She blinked and checked for any lingering pain. There was none. That was a good sign. So she wiggled her toes and dug her fingers into the snow under her. All good there.
What did you do?
A man demanded. Who was he talking to? Rosalie finished checking that nothing was broken and then sat up. She didn't black out and nothing pained her. Maybe I got lucky, and that fall didn't break my foolish neck. Where are we? What is this place? Rosalie glanced around as she rose, her brow wrinkling as she took in the giant thing towering over them. It was insanely long, and taller than the tallest house in her village. The glowing thing extended into the distance in both directions, but only one end widened into something angular.
You must take her back.
a guy said while she gaped at the glowing thing dominating this freezing, snowy place. What in the world is that thing? Rosalie rose and headed for it to get a better look at the flared end, until a guy who looked like an older version of Avarian ran in front of her.
"This is somewhere you shouldn't be,"
said the Avarian look-alike. "Oh, really? Then why am I here?" Rosalie picked up the remains of the spear. For some reason, it landed nearer to the big glowing thing than to where she landed. Probably because it was lighter than her. The wind may have knocked it over there, since it blew toward the angular, flared end of the giant glowing thing. A line of tall, dark, pointed things stood in front of the tip of the glowing thing. Was it a giant spear?
"I brought you here."
Avarian tried to rise and just landed on his backside again. Rosalie stalked over and extended her hand to him. "Here, let me help you. It looks like you need me to be your pack mule again." She was too cold to smile at her joke, and he looked too out of it to notice since his gray eyes struggled to focus on her, so that was all right.
"You're prettier than any pack mule."
Avarian flushed, probably with embarrassment as he took her hand, since he never once commented on her appearance, that she recalled. Rosalie laughed as she dropped the spear butt and pulled him up. "I'm glad for that. So what is this place?"
"Somewhere you shouldn't ever go. Avarian, you can't let her wander around here. You should take her back to wherever she came from."
Avarian's double waved to her. Rosalie wrapped an arm around his waist to hold him up and hoped this wouldn't end in a fight. "If it does, then I'll drop Avarian and charge." The snow wasn't frozen so hard that hitting it would hurt him, but he would hamper her in a fight if she didn't let go of him. If I hit the look-a-leg low, I could probably flip him over my head, but I'd need to slam my shoulder into his thighs. "Who are you? And what gives you the right to order him around?" Rosalie glanced from the look-alike to the stick she dropped when she helped Avarian up. "Should I grab it when I drop Avarian? Nah. I'll probably only get one shot to drop his double. She'd knock him down, then maybe grab the stick. That would give her an advantage."
"He claims he's my cousin, but I don't have any proof that he is."
Avarian glanced at the stick too. Maybe he knew what she was thinking.
"Does she know who you are?"
His cousin pointed at him as the giant arrow/spear thing glowed brighter.
"We should go."
Avarian stumbled away from his cousin, forcing Rosalie to come with him. "Where are we going?" Rosalie pulled him closer and took more of his weight on her shoulders to stop him from swaying and wrecking her balance. He was warm, and the cold seeped through her long-sleeved tunic and the trousers under her dress. Hopefully, they headed somewhere warmer.
"Back in time. I told you I could time walk. Well, that thing over there is the arrow of time. We just need to walk over and pick a moment in time to go back to, and I can take us there."
Avarian nodded to the glowing thing dominating the snowy landscape. So that's what that thing was.
"I won't let you take her with you."
His cousin ran past them and stopped in front of a line carved into the side of the arrow of time. I wonder what the lines are for. Lines carved into the arrow's glowing shaft striped it from just behind its arrow-shaped head for as far as Rosalie could see. "No one asked you what you think." Rosalie pulled Avarian toward another line on the arrow of time so she could get a better look at it. Avarian touched the line on the icy side of the arrow of time, and an ice shelf slid out, presenting a ton of ice crystals. What were they for? Avarian touched the nearest one before she could ask, and the world whited out. Rosalie fell again, but this time, she held tightly to Avarian and trusted his magic to take them to where they needed to go, to right the future, where they belonged. Chapter 2. Fading Away. Rosalie groaned and checked again for any broken bones. She wiggled her toes and dug her hands into the dead leaves. Under them, roots snaked through the earth. Some roots went under her, and that explained why her back ached like she slept on a pile of rocks. "Where am I?" Rosalie opened her eyes and branches tangled high above her. In her peripheral vision, trees stood, and they probably stared at her since she felt like someone watched her every move. But there was no one else here. Well, that answers that question. We're back in Shayari. But when and where were they? Rosalie sat up and rubbed her back. Avarian lay unconscious nearby. Unfortunately, he was the only one who could tell her what she needed to know. Damn it. Rosalie crawled over and sat beside him. "Hey, are you okay?" She shook his shoulder, but he didn't open his eyes or answer her. "Avarian, Please answer me. Rosalie shook him harder, but he didn't stir so much as an eyelash. Damn, he was really out cold, but he was still breathing, so he must not be too badly off. I'd feel better if a healer confirmed that. Unfortunately, no healer wandered out of the woods to help. She'd have to find one herself. Rosalie heaved a tired sigh. Well, sitting here cursing my luck won't fix anything. We need shelter, food, water, and then answers. The forest had 3 rules: start no fires, carry no weapons, and do no harm. But there was a 4th one: don't cut down any trees. Well, I don't have anything to cut anything with, and even if I had something, I wouldn't risk using it. Somehow, she needed to get Iverion some help, too. I don't think I could carry him far. He outweighed her by at least 30 pounds, and he was maybe a half-foot taller than her. So, carrying him was out. What did that leave? Rosalie glanced around and made a list of anything that might help her. Dead branches lay beneath the trees, so she could use them. The enchanted trees allowed that. They just reacted badly when someone tried to hack off a living bough. What else do I have? Rosalie emptied her pockets, but all she had was a pile of glowing strings she braided together earlier and a summoning spell. But she didn't need to summon a god right now, nor did she have any children to sacrifice for the spell, so that wouldn't help her. Rosalie stuffed the summoning spell back into her pocket for safekeeping. Maybe I don't need anything but magical strings and deadfall. That would be convenient, actually. Rosalie gathered longer branches to serve as the sides of a crude sled and shorter ones to use for the backrest. When she had a good-sized pile next to Iverion, she gathered the glowing green strings littering the ground. More fell from the enchanted trees towering over her, and that was great, since she didn't know how many she'd need. I might not know where or when I am, but I know how to weave magical strings into a spell, and right now, she had just the one in mind. Rosalie grabbed 2 branches and a glowing green string and tied them together. Unlike non-magical strings, these wouldn't break until their magic was spent. Since she wasn't using that magic, just using its string-like appearance to bind something, it should hold for as long as she needed it to. I hope a village is nearby, otherwise she'd run into other problems unless she found some clean water soon. Just take things one step at a time and don't worry. Worry was the enemy now. She needed to get this sled built, then pick a direction and hike until she found help. But first, she needed a sled. Once she had the frame assembled, Rosalie checked the fit. It should work, but she lashed more branches together with more magical strings to enlarge the frame, just in case her estimate was wrong. The litter was crude, but it must work because she couldn't carry Iverion. Would it bear his weight without collapsing? Rosalie didn't know, so she added more branches for support. I hope I can drag this thing when I'm done, she thought. Well, there was only one way to find out if her crazy idea would work. Rosalie rolled Iverion onto the litter and lashed him to it with more glowing strings. He looked rather cute, all tied up like that. His dark lashes rested on his pale cheeks, and his white hair shimmered in the green glow of the strings. Now for the hard part. Rosalie picked up the glowing strings as she wove them into a harness and then settled it across her chest and shoulders. All right, strings, you're full of earth magic, so help me drag the sled. Make it slide across the leaf mold as if it were as smooth and slippery as ice. Rosalie crossed her fingers and stepped forward, and the sled slid behind her. Yes, I did it. Now I just need a direction. Rosalie glared at the enchanted tree in front of her. She should climb it and look for a village, but she didn't know if the spell she wove to help her move the sled would hold if she untangled herself from it. Well, the forest is enchanted. Maybe I should try asking it to point me toward help. Besides, it couldn't hurt to ask. The forest could just ignore her if it didn't want to help. Hey, trees, can you point me toward water, food, and shelter? I'd love to find the nearest village, too, if you're in the mood to help. Rosalie waited for a reaction to her question. If there was a proper way to address the forest, she'd never heard it. Maybe she should try a more formal address, since not a single branch twitched. What even counted as a formal mode of address for a bunch of enchanted trees? Maybe something like, "Oh, high and mighty bark-covered ones?" That just sounded ridiculous. I don't think I could say that without laughing. And if she broke up laughing, that might hurt the tree's feelings. Rosalie rubbed her face. Her throat was dry and she needed water soon, but trees surrounded her and nothing else. What about your enchanted highnesses? I think I could say that without laughing, but it sounded just as ridiculous as the other forms of address she thought of. Oh, well, I need to say something. I can't just stand here all day. She shouldn't waste time when she didn't know how much she had to get her timeline back on track and save her family. And Ran was in the future, with the demons bearing down on him. I can help him by stopping those demons before they invade. I don't know how to address you properly, but I need your help. I came back here to set things right and save the future, but I can't do anything if we die of thirst out here. Please help me find water, food, shelter, and someone to look at, Avarian. Rosalie turned as much as the sled would allow and glanced at each tree as she pleaded with them. A ripple went through the trees around her and branches shifted against the wind, stirring their leaves. It was working. They would help her. Just point me in the right direction, I can do the rest. And she would. Rosalie wouldn't leave this time until she did what she came to do. Two trees slid apart, creating a trail where none had been a moment before. All the trees pointed at that trail. I guess this leads to water, food, or civilization. She'd take any of them right now. Thank you. Rosalie bowed as deeply as the harness attaching her to the sled would allow. Then she marched toward that trail. She'd follow wherever it led. Rosalie strained under the unaccustomed weight of pulling a full-grown man over uneven terrain when her spell failed. It couldn't last forever, but there were plenty of magical threads underfoot. I could stop long enough to gather some more threads and use their power to cast another spell to lighten the load. As Rosalie stared at the glowing green strings, she heard Rand's voice in her head when she suggested he do the same a while ago.
I'll do no such thing since I don't know what that would do to him. He's already in shock from too much magic use.
Maybe Ran was right. Rosalie bent to check on her charge. Ivarian's chest rose and fell, so he was still breathing, but that was all he was doing. I guess I shouldn't use magic to lighten him. I got away with it once, I'd better not chance it again. I don't want to harm him since he's my only way back to our time. That meant she had a long, hard slog ahead of her. The thought depressed her, since she didn't know how far away the next village was. It could be 100 miles, or just around that next bend, since most villages were in the branches of the enchanted forest. Focus on what you can change, and let the future take care of itself. And right now, she needed water and food, in that order. Her shoulders and back ached, and her legs shook from exertion. I need food and water before I pass out from hunger and thirst. Her throat burned for water. Excuse me, Rosalie waved to get the enchanted tree's attention. Can you point me toward clean water and something to eat? Should she try a more formal mode of address? Her tired mind couldn't think of any as she leaned against a boulder. Maybe the trees were thinking about her request. She hoped so, because they were her only hope right now, since they limited visibility to a few feet in every direction. Finally, branches pointed at two enchanted trees that looked the same as all the others surrounding her, and they slid apart, creating a new pathway. Behind them, more trees shifted over, lengthening the trail. Thank you, I really appreciate this. Rosalie mopped her brow with her sleeve and set off. Her mouth watered for the cold, clear water of a stream. Twigs snapped underfoot, but that was the only sound. The forest was eerily silent. Not even a bird called or an insect hummed, and that was weird, since the enchanted forest was a noisy place in the summer. As she rounded a bend, vines hung from the lowest branches of a tree, like a leafy green garland, laden with large, red, super-sized apples. They were all fruits, of course. The vines grew all over the understory of the forest. Rosalie jogged toward them, too hungry to care if that jostled Avarian. Maybe he'd wake up and make this trek easier. That didn't happen, so she plucked a ripe all-fruit off the vine and bit into it. When the honey-cinnamon-apple flavor hit her tongue, she moaned in pleasure. Nothing had ever tasted so good. Rosalie ate two, then picked a half dozen and tucked them under Varian's arms to secure them. Thank you for the snack. Now I really need water. Could you please lead me to a stream? Rosalie wiped the juice from her lips onto her sleeve. When she reached civilization again, she'd get another dress and wash this one. Until then, Her sleeves would have to serve as her napkin and sweat rag. All the branches around her pointed at the same trail she followed to the all-fruit. Okay, so the water is that way. I get the point. Rosalie disentangled a few twigs and other debris that got caught in the litter before marching on and finding some water. The giant trees surrounding her blotted out the sky with their branches and leaves, but the sun was definitely setting since it wasn't shining through the trees above her anymore. I'll have to make camp if I don't find a village soon, and she might not. Since Shiari was a big country, I'd better look for a place to stop before nightfall. But she had nothing to set up camp with, since she came here with just the clothes on her back and a useless summoning spell in her pocket. Ahead, an ancient stone circle appeared between the trees. Perhaps she ought to camp there. I might hurt myself if I drag the litter around after dark. The enchanted forest could get pitch dark, but that only happened in winter when the trees hibernated. It was high summer now, judging by the heat baking her in her clothes. Water burbled somewhere nearby. Rosalie searched for it until she realized it flowed right past the stone circle, and its shadow hid it on her first scan. She slid out of the harness she'd made from glowing strings and cupped her hands in the stream. Fresh water slid down her throat, cooling it. It was so good after so long without it. Rosalie drank until her stomach sloshed when she sat on the soft green moss next to the stone circle. Ancient markings, carved in an unreadable script, flowed along the top of the stones. She traced the letters as the sun set behind the trees surrounding her. Was time passing in her time? Or did it stop when she left? Rosalie imagined Ran and Myron, frozen in Mount Eredrin, then laughed at the absurdity of that. Time won't stop for me. I'm no one special. But she felt time was running out, since she wasn't focused on survival anymore. How long do I have to fix things before the changes that swept over the world in my time become permanent? That was the one question she still didn't have an answer for until her hand faded. Rosalie stared through her fingers at the branches above her. When she sat up, she could see through her legs, too. I can't be out of time already. This wasn't how she was supposed to end. Was happening to me. Avarian, wake up!
He can't help you, but I can.
A woman said as a shadow fell over Rosalie.
Chapter 3. Warring Books. Pain punched Garen in the chest, and that shocked him awake. Where am I? Garen opened his eyes and regretted it when the sky tried to blind him. Maybe the sky felt bad about that, because it turned black and plunged him into the darkest night ever, before changing its mind again and fading back into eye-searing orange daylight. What the hell was happening to the sky?
You're still in hell,
Antali said, and it sounded like the Versati rolled their eyes in annoyance. But perhaps he imagined that since he'd just regained consciousness, and he regretted that too. Then why is the sky flipping back and forth between day and night? Can't the Prince of Darkness decide what he wants? Goran shaded his eyes with his hand and hoped the biggest devil of them all picked a time of day before the rapid changes to the sky gave him a headache.
I don't think that's his doing.
Antali sat on a rock and fanned himself. At least they weren't dragging him by his ankles anymore. That was an improvement, and his situation could only get better from here. When did the sky start doing that? Garen waved with a hand that wasn't protecting his eyes from the glare.
It happened around the time that the gateway opened.
Where's the gateway? Garen glanced around while shielding his eyes, but rocks and stone ruins surrounded him, and they weren't helpful. The gateway was nowhere in sight. That didn't mean it was gone, just temporarily out of reach.
Don't even try to go near it or I'll drain you again.
Antali crooked their gloved hands like claws.
You promised to take me to the sleeping angel and I'm making sure you do.
Damn. Well, there was more than one way to reach his goal. He just needed to be smart about this. Once he put Antali at ease, they'd turn their back. Then he'd run toward the gateway, but not until he figured out where the gateway was. I need to convince them to give me my energy back. Since he had no energy to move, Garen lay there and groaned when pain shot through his chest again. What caused that throbbing pain? I wasn't hurt that badly in the arena. At least he didn't think the demon got in a chest shot, but maybe he was misremembering. Or maybe the pain was Nantali's doing to keep him docile. Garen rubbed his chest as pain punched him again. It felt like something was trying to pound its way out of his chest. but it wasn't his heart, because his heart wasn't pounding all that hard, since he was just lying on the ground, doing absolutely nothing to exert himself.
What's wrong? Don't just lie there groaning. Talk to me.
Tali prodded his foot with the tip of their slippered foot. I don't know. It feels like something is trying to tear itself out of my chest. Garen rubbed the area where the pain was the worst, but there wasn't anything in there besides the usual organs, and they were totally useless in hell. So why was the center of his chest so hot?
Let me see.
Tali knelt by his side and pulled up his tunic to expose his chest and the black mark of a winged book.
What is that?
Tali pointed at the mark. Maybe the tattoo didn't like someone pointing at it because it tried to peel itself off his chest, and pain tore through him again. Garen bit back a howl. He still had some pride left, and it wouldn't let him admit how much he hurt. He was being silly, and he knew it. Even ex-gods felt pain, and there was no shame in admitting it. But he just didn't want to sink Tali's opinion of him any lower, not when he would need their flesh-mending power again soon, if that damned book of names didn't knock it off. It's that damn book the sleeping angel asked me to fetch. Garen shoved the damn thing back into his chest, or he tried to anyway. He couldn't tell if he actually affected it in any way. Why was it trying to tear itself away from him?
Oh, you lied to me. You told me you had to get the book from somewhere close by, but the whole time you had it on you.
Tali rose and stalked away. That was fair. He didn't deserve their help. Technically, I wasn't lying. It was close by, and I could lay my hands on it easily. He just neglected to mention that it was on his person. Garen groaned as the book-shaped mark ripped its black wings free from his chest. He gripped the corner of the book, extruding from his chest as the damn thing pumped its wings. Where the hell is this thing trying to go?
It probably wants to return to its maker.
Tali stopped in his peripheral vision. Maybe the book heard that, because it writhed in his grip like a friggin' snake, but Garen couldn't let go. Not when possessing it granted him everyone's true names. That knowledge was too valuable, and he wouldn't part with it, or the advantage it gave him.
Do you know who wrote it?
Tali glared at him with glowing pink eyes as they spun to face him. Did he want to take part in that plan? If that plan gave him a shot at the lying devil who led him to hell, down a path of pride and unwinnable battles against the toughest angels the Creator could muster, then hell yeah, he wanted in. No, I don't know who made it. I'd curse them if I did, Garen said, and then he froze as a name popped into his mind.
How'd you know?
Said the Book of Names, but only Garen heard it, because it spoke in his mind, not anyone else's. But the book settled back into a black-winged, book-shaped mark on his chest, and the pain vanished when it said that damned angel's name. Why did it have to be him? Garen banged the back of his head on the rocky ground, but that didn't change things.
Why does it have to be who wrote the Book of Names?
Tali crouched by him, grasped his head, and stopped him from banging it. Yeah, I know who made it. The damn thing just told me. Garen glared at the sky as it faded to black again.
Why don't you sound happy about that? Shouldn't that information please you?
Tali scowled at him, but they didn't let go. It would, if the angel who created this damn thing didn't drop me off of the spire in the first place. Sometimes I have the worst luck. Garen closed his eyes to block out the sky as the black brightened to a blinding orange again, so he could think. What angle could I play? There was the obvious one. He could walk up to the gates of the Library of Forbidden Knowledge and tell the guards he wanted to return the Book of Names. That should get Arjaniel's attention. What do I do after that?
Oh really? And who's the lucky demon? Maybe I can help you find them.
Tali let go and sat on their heels. No need. I know exactly where to find him. The Book of Names told me all I need to know. Garen just didn't know what to do with that information. His old plan ghosted back to the fore of his mind. But he'd have to forget about the gateway and his cousin in favor of getting revenge on someone who deserved it far more. What if I strode into the rebels' headquarters with the Book of Names and the angel who wrote it? They'd have to name him their leader on the spot.
I see that sly smile. What are you plotting?
Tali slapped his shoulder. A coup. Did you know it's one of my specialties? Garen sat up and ignored the sky. Its random changes couldn't dim his enthusiasm.
No, I didn't. But you're changing the subject. Who wrote the Book of Names? And what are you plotting?
Tali folded their arms. A fallen angel called Argeniel wrote the Book of Names, and I'm not planning anything yet. I'm still checking all the angles. Gwyn rose and scanned the barren plain for the library, or the city, or the spire, or anything really that might tell him where he needed to go.
For what? Oh, forget it. As long as you deliver on your promise to take me to the sleeping angel, I don't care what you do.
And Tali waved their hands as they rose, as if they were trying to keep that nascent plan away from them. Relax. My plan will get us in good with the rebels, but it lacks a lot of details right now. That's what you want, right? Gwyn glanced at them. He might need the Versatis' help to grab Argeniel, so he must stay on their good side.
Yeah.
And Tali turned away. Why did they want to join the rebels? Gwyn could ask, but he doubted he'd get the truth right now.
So what's the plan so far?
When Tali faced him, they smoothed away all trace of whatever they were just thinking or feeling, and the facade the Versatis used to keep the world at bay was back in place. Well, first off, I need to find the Library of Forbidden Knowledge, because that's where Argeniel is, but I don't see anything I recognize. Gwyn didn't want to hike for miles unless he headed to a battle, but he should probably try diplomacy first. After all, he needed a compliant fallen angel, because Argeniel still had all his power down here, so kidnapping him was out.
It's over there.
And Tali waved, and the illusion of a barren plain vanished. The gateway glowed in between buildings in the city, and the fortress-like Library of Forbidden Knowledge loomed over its other side. The gateway tempted him as he stared at it, but the Book of Names wrenched one wing free, and the pain shocked him out of his half-formed thoughts of running to it. No, I have a new plan, and I'm sticking with it. Hithalier can wait. I'll pay him back for ruining my heist later. I have all eternity to wait. His cousin would slip up eventually, and there would be a reckoning. Gwyn tucked that away for later. He had a weapon to grab, a rebel army to lead, and a war to start.
You're not thinking of crossing through that gateway, are you?
And Tali grasped his arm, and his energy flowed into their hand. No, I have a fallen angel to find. Gwyn set off for the city limits, and hoped it was closer than it appeared. Distances were deceptive in hell, and they changed depending on which demons were around. Some demons could extend a trek or shorten it with their auras, and that was damned inconvenient. As Tali followed him, they reversed the drain, restoring his energy, but they didn't let go. Their gloved hand encircled his wrist like a manacle.
I've never been to the library.
Well, I have, and I hope that was a one-time event. Apparently it wasn't. Gwyn tried not to recall how twisted reality got inside that place.
What are you really planning? I see that crease in your brow you get when you're scheming.
And Tali squeezed his wrist, but they had small hands, so it didn't hurt. Not like that damned Book of Names trying to break free from his chest. That was the worst pain he'd felt in a long time. I'm always scheming. Gwyn waggled his eyebrows suggestively, even though he wasn't thinking anything of the sort. But he was definitely scheming. And thoughts of the rebels kept him from thinking about the gateway between them and the library. The Book of Names was powerful. If he had its maker in his thrall too, that would make him one of the most powerful beings in hell. And that was something he needed to consider further. Maybe he was thinking too small earlier. Why lead a bunch of rebels when he could lead all the armies of hell?
The rebellion needs you.
The sleeping angel whispered, and she sounded like she stood right by his ear. When he turned his head, she wasn't there. But his thoughts turned back to the library. I'll probably have to sneak in again. Then his plan fell apart, because he didn't know what he would find when he reached the library. Would Argeniel come with him? Probably not. I'll have to knock him out somehow, and drag him with me. How the hell do you subdue a fallen angel? Well, that was a question for later. First things first, he needed a boost. His steps already dragged, but that meant another deal with Tali. Could you give me a boost? This time, I give you my word as a war god that I will do what I promised. I'll take you to the sleeping angel when I find her. Gwyn rested a hand on his heart, but not the one she held captive.
All right, but I'm watching you. I can take away what I give just as easily.
The Versati snapped their fingers in front of his face. I know that. This time, you won't have to. I've got a war to plan. Now, let's go capture a fallen angel. Garen pulled Natalie's arm through his, breaking their hold on his wrist as he sauntered toward the city. He hadn't felt this powerful in a long time. Was he powerful enough to take on a fallen angel? Only time would tell.
Chapter 4. Protect the Library. Arginel staggered through the doorway the instant it appeared. The secret chamber was still in shambles, thanks to that ex-god what's-his-name. Broken pieces of a stone steel littered the floor, and books and scrolls, too, since that jerk knocked over a shelving unit. What a messy thief. The mess bothered Arginel, but he didn't have time to pick up the pieces of the steely or reshelve the books and scrolls. He grimaced at the mess as he stepped around it to reach the iron chest by the wall. Light spilled out when he lifted the lid and placed the shoestone inside. For a long moment, the violet light of the old scrying stone entranced him with images of the angels he knew. There was Thaniel, scowling as she listened to Azrael talk about something. Oz spread his arms to show something, but Arginel closed the lid, and that cut off the images in his mind. It was too painful to see his friends in heaven. They've all forgotten about me since I've been gone a long time. It was hard to tell how long since there wasn't any time in hell, but time existed outside it. Stop thinking about that. You must protect this library and everything in it. After that pep talk, Arginel rose and swayed as exhaustion threatened to flatten him again. But he couldn't let that happen. I must protect the library, and if I've got any power left, I'll take down the gateway somehow. Arginel staggered past the debris and out of the secret chamber. Behind him, the bookcase swung closed, hiding the door. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it would make that chamber harder for anyone to find, since anyone searching for it wouldn't look for a mechanical barrier. The lead lining of the chamber should keep any of the magic from the relics in the trunk from leaking out. But all those precautions may not be enough if one of his kind came looking. Any angel, fallen or otherwise, could sense magic without even trying. He needed a magical solution for that problem, and he had a spell in mind that should blanket the library with enough magic to confuse even his kind. I hope I have enough power left to cast it. That was his only concern right now, as he wove through the narrow aisles between shelving units.
Setting the traps while necessary doesn't seem like enough. Is there anything else we can do?
Antares asked from another aisle. Send the demons in the caves below the library out to defend it. Put them in between us and the city. Arginel reached the side door finally, and staggered up the spiral staircase to his eyrie.
What if they turn on us?
Antares asked from the bottom of the staircase. Then we fight them too. But this was all conjecture right now. No one had attacked the library in a long time. Maybe no one would know either. But Arginel doubted it as he struggled up the last steps. He had just enough energy left to stagger to a desk in front of a shuttered window. He shoved the metal shutter aside and gazed out at the city, across the plain of stones and ruins. No army marched toward the library yet, but there was only a mile or two between the library's high walls and the edge of the city, so that didn't mean anything. An army could reach them quickly if it were motivated. The eye-shaped gateway still sat in the middle of an intersection, surrounded by buildings damaged by its violent opening. As happened before, the gateway split into 3 gateways, all in a line. Then they merged together. He could only see the top of the gateway from this vantage, but surely some enterprising demons already ran through it. I'll deal with you next. Arginel closed the metal shutters to block out the sky when it brightened to a blinding orange. But the sky was just a symptom of the wrongness introduced by that damned gateway. Arginel fell onto the stool before a desk facing the metal shutters and pulled out some paper, a quill, and an ink pot from the drawer. Then he stopped. Would this ink be powerful enough? He examined the inkwell and tried to remember what the ink was made of before setting it it aside. It probably wasn't. Well, there was one fluid that would guarantee this spell would be potent. He grimaced at the thought of using it, but he didn't have anything left to give. I might as well put all of myself into this working. He didn't like blood magic, but it was more powerful in hell than anywhere else, and the most powerful blood to use just so happened to be angel's blood. Arginil laughed at the irony, then pressed a long nail into the underside of his wrist, and lavender blood welled up from the cut. He dipped the tip of the quill into the blood and drew the first sigil of many to set the spell. Here, take this to the room at the pinnacle of the west tower. Arginil held the sheet of paper out for Antares. The demon lurking in the stairwell hurried to grab it.
Are you all right? You're bleeding, and you look close to collapse.
Don't worry about me. Take that to the west tower and send someone to get the next one. Arginil dipped the quill's tip into his blood and scrawled the next sigil. His hands shook as he wrote, "Will this be enough?" The question plagued him as shadows edged his vision and the room dimmed. But he kept writing because the spell might be all that saved the library, and that was his only concern now. He must finish the spell, even if that destroyed him. An image swam in and out of view, something he glimpsed once from the deck of Ezaria's ship. In that memory, sunlight sparkled on the water as the waves rolled ashore. When the end comes, I want to be that light, so close to the shores of heaven but never touching it. When he handed off the last sigil, a bright light blinded him. He hoped that was the spell completing and the shield it created settling into place over the library. But he didn't have the energy to throw back the metal shutters to check. Arginil slipped off the stool and lay on the stone floor as darkness took him.
You've been listening to Part 1 of Summon the Gods, Book 2 of the Rogue Gods Trilogy by Melinda Kucsera. Subscribe to the channel so you'll be notified when the sequel publishes. The Rogue Gods Trilogy is available as an ebook and paperback, and now a full-cast audiobook. Click the link in the description to order your copy. If you love the Rogue Gods Trilogy, then you'll love Melinda's other epic fantasy adventure books too. They're just as full of magic and mayhem and characters who will do anything to achieve their goals. Check them out at the link in the description, and while you're there, sign up for her newsletter so her characters can talk directly to you. Thank you for listening.